Graduation day. For most people, it's one of the brightest milestones of their life. A day when all the late nights, the tears, the endless deadlines and doubts finally add up to something. You walk across that stage, you shake a hand, and you finally get to breathe. For me, it was supposed to be that too. Except, as I looked out into the sea of proud faces, cameras flashing, families cheering their kids on, my stomach sank. Because I saw them, my parents, and they weren't sitting where I told them to. No, they were 2 rows back, squeezed in with my sister Claire, her husband and their kids, laughing, passing snacks, fussing over the twins who were already bored and kicking their legs. And me, their daughter in the cap and gown, moments away from walking across the stage. I was invisible. Not once did my mom's eyes search for me in the crowd of graduates. Not once did my dad raise a hand to wave. Every laugh, every smile, every ounce of their attention was wrapped around Claire and her perfect little family, just like always. And for the first time that day, I wasn't nervous about walking across the stage. I wasn't even nervous about my speech. I was angry, because this was supposed to be my day, and they were already stealing it. But they had no idea. By the time I walked off that stage, I'd make sure they never forgot me again. The ceremony began. One by one, names were called. Proud families leaned forward, clapping, cheering, snapping photos. The energy in the room was electric. Years of sacrifice finally celebrated in one collective roar of joy. But not for me. Every time I glanced at my parents, my chest tightened. They weren't looking at the stage. They weren't looking at the rows of graduates. They were looking at Claire's kids, trying to keep them entertained with coloring books and juice boxes. My mom even handed her phone to my sister so she could take pictures of the twins, right there in the middle of my graduation. The anger bubbled higher. I thought back to all the years leading up to this moment. The nights I stayed up until 3 a.m. finishing research papers. The times I worked 2 jobs to cover rent and tuition because financial help was always reserved for Claire's emergencies. The holidays I spent alone because the family schedule always revolved around her. And now, the pattern was repeating, right here, on the biggest day of my life so far. But there was one difference. This time, I had the microphone, because not only was I graduating, I had been chosen as the valedictorian, which meant I was about to deliver a speech. The speech I had carefully written was full of gratitude, anecdotes, and hope for the future. But sitting there, watching my parents laugh and beam at everyone except me, I knew something had to change. This couldn't be another moment where I swallowed my feelings and played the good daughter. No. This time, they were going to hear me, whether they wanted to or not. The announcer's voice echoed through the auditorium. Valedictorian. Please welcome to the stage, Emily Ellis. That was me. My legs trembled as I stood. But not from nerves, from fire. The kind that builds inside you after years of being overlooked, overshadowed, silenced. The applause was polite, but distant. I glanced at my parents one last time as I walked toward the podium. My dad was leaning down to whisper something to Claire. My mom was digging in her purse. Neither of them saw me take the stage. I gripped the podium. The speech I had written, full of cliches and inspirational quotes, sat neatly folded in my pocket. I had practiced it for weeks, but suddenly I knew I wasn't going to use it. Not today. I looked out over the sea of faces. Rows of proud families, teary-eyed mothers, fathers on the edge of their seats, children holding signs, and behind them, my parents, still wrapped in Claire's orbit like I was just a stranger passing through. The lump in my throat tightened, but I forced myself to breathe. Then I began. At graduation, we're told to thank the people who helped us get here, the people who cheered us on, who made sacrifices, who showed up for us. And for many of you, that's your parents, your family. A wave of nods spread through the audience. I saw mothers squeeze their children's hands, fathers clear their throats. I let the silence stretch. Then I added, but what if they didn't? The room shifted. Murmurs rippled. I could feel the air sharpen. I wasn't just giving a speech anymore. I was about to tell my truth. I steadied my hands on the podium, the words spilling out before I could second-guess them. What if the people who were supposed to cheer for you looked the other way? What if every milestone you reached was treated like background noise because someone else in the family was louder, brighter, more convenient to celebrate? The silence in the room grew heavier. I know what that feels like, I said, my voice firmer now. Because for me, today isn't just about crossing a stage. It's about standing here, in front of all of you, and saying I made it, even when the people I wanted most to notice never really did. I paused, my eyes locking on my parents. For the first time all day, they were actually looking at me. My mother's face was pale. My father's jaw was tight. Claire shifted uncomfortably in her seat, whispering something to her husband. Good. Let them squirm. I turned back to the audience. I worked 2 jobs. I cried over textbooks at 3 a.m. I failed, and then I tried again. And every step of the way I told myself, maybe this time they'll see me. Maybe this time they'll say they're proud. A few people in the crowd were nodding. Some clapped softly. But here's what I learned. I continued, my voice rising. Recognition is nice. Support is important. But your worth, my worth, doesn't come from who claps the loudest in the stands. It comes from refusing to quit, even when the seats are empty. The words weren't rehearsed, but they felt truer than anything I'd ever said. And in that moment, I wasn't just speaking for me. I was speaking for every overlooked child in that room. The auditorium was utterly still. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but the words kept flowing, stronger now, like they had been waiting years to escape. I used to think being ignored meant I wasn't enough, I said, scanning the crowd. That maybe if I worked harder, earned better grades, or smiled wider, I'd finally be seen. But here I am, top of my class, and some people still can't look up long enough to notice. I heard a sharp intake of breath from my mother's row. My father shifted in his chair. Claire crossed her arms tightly, as if I had just broken some sacred rule by saying the quiet part out loud. I gripped the podium tighter. But you know what? That's okay. Because today I realized something. Their silence doesn't define me. My success does. My effort does. I do. The audience erupted into applause. It wasn't polite clapping anymore. It was loud. Raw. Real. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. I swallowed hard, fighting back the lump in my throat. So to everyone out there who knows what it feels like to be overlooked, forgotten or dismissed, this moment is for you. Your worth isn't measured by who shows up for you. It's measured by the fact that you showed up for yourself. More cheers. A standing ovation in the far corner. My classmates pounding their hands together in support. I glanced back at my parents once more. They weren't clapping. Not even a little, but it didn't matter, because for the first time in my life, I didn't need them to. The applause roared in my ears, echoing against the rafters of the auditorium. I stood a little taller behind the podium, letting the energy wash over me. For once, the cheers weren't for Claire. They weren't for her kids, or her husband, or some achievement I was expected to step aside for. They were for me. I let the clapping settle before I spoke again. When we graduate, we're told to thank the people who helped us get here, and I do have people to thank. My professors who saw potential in me, my classmates who studied beside me, my friends who reminded me to laugh when everything felt too heavy. And most importantly, I paused, steadying my voice, myself, because I kept going when no one thought I could. I believed in me when others didn't, and I hope every graduate here today learns to do the same. A hush fell again, the kind of hush that wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. Then slowly the audience rose. Another wave of applause, louder than before. I saw rows of people standing, cheering, some even wiping tears. And in the middle of it all, my parents remained seated. My mother's lips were pressed into a thin line. My father stared at the floor. Claire whispered something harshly in my mother's ear. I almost laughed. Because for once, their disapproval didn't sting. It liberated me. I finished my speech with a smile, clear and unshakable. To the class of 20, congratulations. May you never wait for applause that was never meant for you. Applaud yourselves, every single day. I stepped away from the podium to thunderous cheers. My classmates high-fived me as I returned to my seat, some even hugging me, whispering, "That was incredible." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter. I felt like the voice they could never silence again. When the ceremony ended, the crowd spilled out into the bright courtyard, the air buzzing with laughter, camera shutters, and the sharp smell of flowers pinned to gowns and lapels. All around me, classmates were being swallowed into hugs, smothered in kisses, their parents proudly holding them as though they'd just conquered the world. I clutched my diploma to my chest like a lifeline. This was supposed to be that moment for me too, the one where my parents would come rushing through the crowd, their faces glowing, their arms open wide, and finally, I'd hear the words I had craved since I was a little girl. "We're proud of you, Emily." But when I turned toward where I'd seen them sitting during the ceremony, my stomach sank. There they were. Not with me, not even looking for me. They were standing near the courtyard fountain, their bodies angled toward Claire. My mother had one of Claire's twins in her arms, rocking him gently. My father was balancing a paper plate full of hors d'oeuvres, half listening to whatever Claire was saying while the other twin tugged at his sleeve. Claire, as always, was the sun in their orbit. Her perfect hair, her perfect smile, her perfect little family, all of it pulled them in like gravity. And me? I might as well have been invisible. I stood frozen, watching, waiting for just one glance, one flicker of acknowledgement, but nothing came. They were laughing, adjusting Claire's husband's tie, taking turns holding the twins. My entire world had just shifted. I had just delivered the most important speech of my life, and they couldn't be bothered to look up. The weight of it hit me all at once. My throat tightened. My diploma felt suddenly heavy, as if it carried the sum of every disappointment that had led to this moment. And yet, deep down a small, steady voice whispered, "You don't need them anymore." Still, I lingered there, hoping for something, anything, to prove that I wasn't completely invisible to the people who were supposed to see me first, but nothing came. I thought about walking over, forcing myself into their circle, maybe handing my father the diploma and saying, "Here, this is what you should be proud of." But the thought died as quickly as it came, because I already knew how it would go. My mother would smile too brightly, that smile she uses when she's embarrassed but pretending not to be. My father would mutter something generic like, "Good job, kiddo." And then within seconds, the spotlight would swing back to Claire. Her kids would cry, or her husband would need something, or she'd make an announcement that pulled all the attention back to her. I'd vanish again. Just like always. So I stayed where I was, clutching the diploma, fighting back tears that burned behind my eyes. Not because I was sad anymore, but because I was angry. Angry that even here, even now, on the one day that was supposed to be about me, they had found a way to make me invisible. But then, something shifted. A voice called out, "Emily." "Over here." It was Professor Adams, my mentor. He waved me over with a broad smile, his cap slightly askew, his gown billowing in the breeze. When I reached him, he clasped my hand and pulled me into a hug. "That was the bravest speech I've heard in 20 years of teaching," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Do not ever lose that fire. The world needs it." Before I could respond, 2 classmates ran up, phones out. "Can we get a picture with you?" They asked breathlessly. "Your speech. Oh my God. It gave us chills." I laughed softly, letting them crowd in on either side. Then another student came. And another. Suddenly I was surrounded. People wanting selfies, wanting to shake my hand, wanting to say, "Thank you. You said what I've always wanted to say." And as cameras clicked around me, it hit me. I had been looking in the wrong direction all along. Maybe my parents couldn't see me, but everyone else did. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the background character in someone else's story. I was the voice people remembered, and that was worth more than any reluctant, "I'm proud of you," they could have given. That night, I returned to my apartment with the medal still hanging around my neck. The weight of it was comforting, like proof that everything I had fought for wasn't just in my imagination. It was real, solid, undeniable. I set my diploma carefully on the kitchen table, as though it might shatter if I wasn't gentle enough. Then I stood there in the silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of laughter drifting up from the street below. And that's when the loneliness hit. Because this was supposed to be the night of celebration dinners, family photos at restaurants, toasts over glasses of champagne. I should have been surrounded by hugs and proud words, not staring at a diploma in an empty room. The silence pressed in heavier, until my phone buzzed. A message. I grabbed it quickly, my heart foolishly hoping it might finally be the words I had been waiting years to hear. It wasn't. It was from my mom. Just one sentence. "You embarrassed us today." I sat down hard, staring at the screen. My stomach churned. Not congratulations, not we're proud of you, not even good job, embarrassed. That was the word she chose. My chest tightened, but then something strange happened. Instead of crumbling, instead of shrinking under the weight of her disappointment like I used to, I felt myself grow steadier. Because if speaking the truth embarrassed them, then maybe it meant I had finally said what needed to be said. I typed out a dozen different replies, each sharper than the last. Did you even hear a word of my speech? Embarrassed of me or embarrassed of yourselves? Funny how I could make a room full of strangers stand up and clap, but my own parents couldn't even look at me. But I deleted them all, because anger wasn't what I wanted to send back. Not anymore. So instead I wrote just one sentence. I spoke the truth. I hit send. For a moment, I watched the little 3 dots appear on the screen, signaling she was typing. My heart raced. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was when she'd finally break through and say the words I had longed for. The dots blinked, stopped, vanished. Nothing came. And for the first time in my life, I didn't wait. I didn't sit there hoping she'd change her mind. I didn't replay the silence in my head like it was somehow my fault. I set the phone down, opened my window, let the cool night air rush in and carry the weight away. Because the truth is, my graduation wasn't ruined, it was rewritten, and this time, it wasn't their story, it was mine. The days after graduation were surreal. At first, I thought my speech would disappear into the noise of the ceremony, remembered only by those who were in the room. But I was wrong. Very wrong. Clips of it started appearing online. Classmates had recorded me from their seats, and by the next morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Friends were tagging me in posts. Strangers were sharing my words with captions like, "This hit harder than any graduation speech I've ever heard." By the end of the week, the video had tens of thousands of views. People I had never met were writing to me. Some told me my words gave them courage. Others confessed they cried watching, because they too had been the child who never got noticed, the sibling always standing in the shadow. It was overwhelming, but in the best way. For the first time in my life, people weren't ignoring me. They were listening. They were hearing me. Meanwhile, my parents said nothing. Not a word, no congratulations, no calls, just that single text from my mother. "You embarrassed us today." It was as if they had chosen silence as their punishment. The same silence they had used my whole life, wrapped up now like a final weapon. But here's the thing. This time, it didn't hurt the way it used to, because I had finally found a louder audience than their silence could ever drown out. Then came the call I never expected. Claire. At first, I almost didn't answer. My thumb hovered over the screen, ready to decline. I assumed she'd be furious, ready to defend our parents, ready to accuse me of ruining the family's reputation. But something inside me said, "Answer it." Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Emily, I don't agree with how you did it, but you weren't wrong." I froze. My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" She sighed heavily, the sound of someone finally dropping a mask. "You think I don't notice? That Mom and Dad pour everything into me while treating you like an afterthought? I see it. I've always seen it. I just never said anything." Her honesty knocked the wind out of me. Then why? I whispered. "Why didn't you ever speak up? Why didn't you ever tell them it wasn't fair?" There was a pause. Then quietly, "Because I liked being the favorite too much." Her words cut like glass. Sharp, painful, but real. For the first time, my sister wasn't pretending. She wasn't hiding behind the pedestal they'd built for her. She was admitting what I had always known but never heard out loud. She had seen me, she had known, and she had chosen silence too. It hurt. But it also lit a fire, because if my speech had cracked even Claire's carefully polished surface, then maybe, just maybe, I had done more than just free myself. Maybe I had shaken the foundation of everything our family had been built on. Weeks passed before I saw my parents again. It wasn't at a family dinner. It wasn't because they reached out. It happened by accident, at the grocery store of all places. I was pushing a cart down the produce aisle when I spotted them. My mom, carefully inspecting apples like she was searching for imperfections, and my dad trailing behind with a half-empty basket. For a moment, I thought about ducking into another aisle, pretending I hadn't seen them. But then my mom looked up. Our eyes met. She froze. So did I. Her lips tightened, and I could see the storm brewing behind her eyes. My father gave me a quick nod, almost guilty, like a man who had been caught in a lie but didn't want to admit it. I stood still, my hands gripping the cart handle. The distance between us felt heavier than the shelves stacked with fruit and vegetables. Finally, my mom broke the silence. "We read what people are saying online," she said sharply. "Do you feel better now? Humiliating your own family?" Her words landed like a slap, but instead of shrinking, I felt something rise in me. That same fire from my speech, steady and unshakable. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't waver. "I do feel better, because it wasn't humiliation. It was truth. And the truth should never embarrass anyone, unless they have something to be ashamed of." My mom's face turned red. Her jaw clenched. My father looked at the floor, pretending to examine a stack of bananas. For years, I would have taken their silence as a wound. But standing there, diploma still fresh in my memory, I realized something. Their silence wasn't my prison anymore. I didn't move. I didn't apologize. I didn't beg for approval like I had so many times before. Instead, I stood tall, my cart between us like a line that would never be crossed again. My mom opened her mouth, ready to fire back, but no words came out. She wasn't used to me standing my ground. She wasn't used to me refusing to play the role of the quiet, grateful daughter. My dad finally muttered, "Let's go," and gently tugged at her arm. They turned, their backs retreating down the aisle, leaving me standing there with the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. For a moment, I felt the ache I'd always carried, the longing for them to turn around, to say they were proud, to recognize me at last. But it passed, because I finally understood something. My speech hadn't changed them. It wasn't meant to. It had changed me. I no longer needed their claps, their approval, or their recognition to feel whole. I had already proved to myself, and to everyone who heard me that day, that my voice mattered, and that was enough. So yes, at my graduation, my parents sat with my sister's family and ignored me. But my speech? It made me impossible to ignore ever again, because in that moment, I stopped being the forgotten daughter, and I became the woman who finally claimed her own story. It was theirs,